Okay, Sheikh, we can start inshallah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. الحمد لله, we're on Babu At-Ta'arud, the chapter of contradictions. Is that how they've translated it? Yeah, contradictions now. And we mentioned that contradictions are of many types. And these contradictions, well, apparent contradictions, they can take place in many different ways. So even if you look at just the texts, it could take place in the sanad of the matan, sanad as in the authenticity of the hadith and so on, or it could take place in the matan, the meaning of the hadith and so on. And what the author has focused on here is mostly on the text and mostly in regards to al-am wal-khas, and mostly in regards to al-am wal-khas. Now, for extra fa'idah, there is a very good book, which, again, the book itself actually doesn't mention everything, but it does mention and highlight some of the main points regarding this topic, which is رفع الملام عن الأئمة الأعلام. رفع الملام عن الأئمة الأعلام. And this could maybe translate to removing the blame upon the main imams, the major scholars, and something similar to that. I'm not sure what the exact. It is available in English, but I can't remember the exact translation of it. But it should be something along them lines. And it's written by Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. And his book Raf' al-Malam is basically, he explains why do ulama differ. So it's a very good book to go through to understand why do ulama differ. And from the answers why do ulama differ is this chapter right here, At-Ta'arud. So we are looking at how do we reconcile between certain proofs. And we're mentioning one of the main ways, but ulama do differ. We did give like the example of the does touching on private parts break your wudu or not. We kind of indicated to how ulama differ, and we can see that in terms of they differ in terms of their usul, i.e. usul, the principles in usul al-fiqh. So just to recap, we said that the different types of ta'arud, contradictions or apparent contradictions, we said are four types. Firstly, between two nusus, two texts which are am, or two dalils which are am, or two dalils which are khas, or one is am and one is khas, or between both of them are am, however one is more am than the other from one aspect and the other is more am from a different aspect. I'm going to explain what that means once we get there, inshallah. And in the previous session we talked about the first one, which was two dalils which are am, and we explained that the first thing that we should do is we should try to combine and do jam' between both of them. And we give the example of the hidayah, the guidance. And then the second thing, if you're not able to do jam', then you do nasakh with the condition that you know the tarikh, the timestamps. The third is that if you're not able to do nasakh, then you move on to doing tarjih, which is giving preference to one dalil over the other. And which one do you choose if you do tarjih? Then you go to murajjihat. Murajjihat are those factors which give preference to one over the other. And the next chapter is actually going to talk a bit about it's going to mention some of those murajjihat. So, we can discuss these murajjihat later. But we did mention, for the example of wudu, some ulama that do go to doing a tarjih. Some ulama do jam'a, some do nasakh and so on. But those that do tarjih, that move to this third point, then they said because it's more safer, it's more authentic, it has more narrators, and it's giving a ruling which goes against the foundational, the asl. And whenever that takes place, and then we should take that ruling because it's ziyadatu ilm. There's more knowledge in that. And then the fourth the fourth point is that if you're not able to do that as well, then you have to do tawaqquf. Then you stop and you can't give an opinion in that. Now move on to the second type, where it says on the screen, which is B. The contradiction occurs between two specific texts, then this also has four cases. So now we have two proofs. Both of them are khas. Both of them are khas, i.e. they're not general, talking about a general ruling. For example, whoever touches the private parts, then he should do wudu. That's general, talking about every single person. It's just general, right? But now we're talking about specific scenarios and incidents. And in this case, it follows a very similar pattern to the previous. So if you read what the Shaykh says, the contradiction occurs between two specific texts, then this also has four cases. Number one, both can be reconciled. The first thing they do is jama', is you reconcile between both of them, in which case it must be done. So if you're able to do jama', then you must do jama', because now you are working with both proofs and acting upon both proofs rather than giving preference to one or whatever the case may be. So an example being the narration of Jabir radiallahu anhu regarding his description of the Hajj of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now Jabir has a very, very famous hadith. It's called the Hadith of Jabir. When you say the Hadith of Jabir, generally the ulama understand what he's talking about. And this is the Hadith of Jabir in Hajj, where he basically, it's a long hadith and he explained the whole Hajj of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that is like one of the main hadith, and it's an asl when it comes to Kitab al-Hajj. And notice I said the word asl because asl here, the meaning would be ad-dalil. It's the main dalil when it comes to Hajj. Anyways, an example being the narration of Jabir regarding his description of the Hajj of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he prayed the Dhuhr on the day of sacrifice in Mecca. And in the narration of Ibn Umar, the Prophet prayed it Dhuhr in Mina. Right. So you understand now this is khas because it's talking about the same incident. It's not talking about Dhuhr generally. It's talking about a specific incident. So in one hadith, Jabir is saying the Prophet prayed it in Mecca. And the other hadith is that he prayed it in Mina. Mina at that time now it's kind of inside Mecca because Mecca has expanded, but that was outside of Mecca at the time. Mecca was only the Masjid al-Haram and surrounding areas, that's it. So how do we combine between, so what do we do? One is saying Prophet did it in Mecca, the other is saying he did it in Mina, and both of these are khas. So what do we do in this case? If we can combine them and the combination is what? So the Sheikh, he says these two narrations are reconciled by the fact that the Prophet prayed in Mecca and then he went out to Mina and he prayed again with his companions. So the Prophet did it twice. The Prophet prayed Dhuhr twice, but one was with the intention that it was a fard, and the other was the intention that it was a nafil, and that is something permissible, and that is a different fiqhi issue. That kind of person prays salah twice, and the answer is that yes, he can, because that's what Mu'adh radiallahu anhu used to do. He used to pray Isha with the Prophet, and then he used to go lead his people in his masjid Isha. But obviously, the first one would be fard, and the other would be a nafil. And this Imam Nawawi, when he explained this hadith in Sahih Muslim, he mentioned that this is the only way that we can combine between the two. So inshallah makes sense that if you're able to combine, then you combine. And this is a very good example of that. Point number 2, if you cannot reconcile, then the second abrogates. Same thing, you move to nasakh. Nasakh. And in here there are two ayat that the Shaykh has mentioned. The first ayat is that the Prophet ﷺ basically summarized, he was given permission to marry other than his wives that he had already married from the daughters of his uncles and aunties. And then in the next ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it haram. So it's the same issue. The Prophet ﷺ marrying his other than his wives. So the second ayah, basically, how do we combine between the two? The first made it allowed for the Prophet, and the second it was not allowed for the Prophet. So the second verse abrogates the first based on one view. So one way is that the ulama say that the second ayah came because you can't combine between the two. So the ulama say that you what you do is that you we do nasakh. We see that the second ayah because it came later, then it does nasakh and it abrogates the previous ayah, and that is out of honor for the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, that they have been chosen by Allah and His Messenger. Now, and this is also, this opinion has also been narrated on Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. So this way of doing it, doing naskh, because there's no way to do jam'. The third is if there isn't any abrogation, either, for example, you don't know the tarikh, then you have to tarjih. So the Shaykh says if there isn't any abrogation, then the more preferred of the two should be acted upon if one isn't found. The example, and it's a very, very famous example, the narration of Maymuna radiallahu anha. When did she marry the Prophet? Did she marry the Prophet whilst the Prophet was in the state of ihram? When you go for Umrah or Hajj, you're in the state of ihram. And as we know, generally that's not allowed, right? So did the Prophet do that whilst he was in the state of ihram? Or did he do it when he was halal, meaning not in the state of ihram? So when you say, in this case, when the person says person was halal, it means wasn't in the state of ihram. From the word haram, because when you're in the state of ihram, there's certain things that become haram upon you to do, right? And one of them is marrying. So let's figure what the Shaykh says. The example, the narration of Maymuna radiallahu anha, that the Prophet ﷺ married her whilst he was not in the state of ihram. And the narration of Ibn Abbas, that the Prophet ﷺ married her while being in the state of ihram. So Maymuna, she says that no, Prophet ﷺ was halal, and Ibn Abbas said no, he was in the state of ihram. What do we do? It's a khas, is talking about the same incident. The most correct opinion is that the first is the first. I.e. what Maymuna said, that the Prophet did it while he was not in the state of ihram, i.e. he was halal. Why? The Shaykh mentions two reasons. So these are two murajjihat, two factors that we have taken into consideration that gives preference to the fact to the opinion that the Prophet was not in the state of ihram. The first is that Maymuna Sahib al-Qissa, she is the one who is narrating the story. She's the one who's in the story. It's her story. So obviously what she's narrating she's narrating what's happened to her. That shows that she was generally more knowledgeable than somebody else who's narrating. So that's what the Shaykh says. The most correct opinion is the first, because Maymuna is the person telling the story. So she is more aware of what happened. She's the one that married the Prophet ﷺ. The second, her narration is supported by other narration of Abu Rafi', that the Prophet ﷺ married her while he was in the state of ihram, and he said, I was a messenger between them. So we have a supporting dalil for that also. And a third reason can also be given is that Ibn Abbas was very, very young at that time. When the Prophet passed away, they say he was only about 13. So when this took place, he was would have been a lot younger than that. And because it's something to do with marriage, and maybe a child at that time may not understand some of the issues taking place in marriage, we could say that maybe he was mistaken as well. Maybe he didn't understand some of the details. So that's the third, even though one could say that's probably the weakest out of the three, but it can also be used as a point or an excuse to why Ibn Abbas said that. Now, and not only was he younger, may not understand, but obviously being younger as well, then even in terms of even generally, not true with marriage, but generally, a person who's older understands things a lot more. So when you're younger, maybe you don't understand generally, but obviously with nikah, maybe a bit more. Allahu Alam. Number 4 is if there is no preferred opinion, then both should not be acted upon, and no sound example of this can be found. And we talked about this previously. And I think another example that we can give for number 3 is the issue of Raf' al-Yadayn as well. Because in the, for example, Hadith of Ibn Umar, where which is in Bukhari and Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ said, where he said, I saw the Prophet ﷺ when he started his salah, opened his salah, he would do Raf' al-Yadayn. He would raise his hands to his shoulders. When he would do ruku', he would do the same. And when he would get up from the ruku', he would do the same. And he wouldn't do that when he would go into sujood. But on the other side, you have a hadith of Ibn Mas'ud where he said the Prophet ﷺ didn't do Raf' al-Yadayn, he didn't raise his hands except in the beginning. Now, which one do we give preference to? We say we give preference to Ibn Umar. Firstly, because his is more authentic, and the hadith of Ibn Mas'ud is mukhtalaf fiha. You know, some ulama say da'if, some say hasan, some say sahih. There's a lot of khilaf in regards to its authenticity. The second is that there are more narrators, more Sahaba have narrated the same as Ibn Umar, and some have counted more than 60. So more than 60 Sahaba have done so. Assalamu alaikum. हाँ जी जी नहीं कोई बात नहीं so some have narrated that more than 50-60 companions narrated the Prophet and there's only one saying that he didn't, and some have also said that all the 10 promised paradise, you know, all of them were doing Raf'a al-Yadayn. No, and there's two statements, so I can't remember at the moment. There's one, I mean, Ibn Qayyim's got a book on Raf'a al-Yadayn, and towards the end he has a nice statement which summarizes the issue. And Imam Bukhari also has a book on this, and he also has a statement which I can't remember the statements right now, but they would be good statements as well. But in terms of Usool al-Fiqh, you know, this is why we can, you know, in this issue, why do we do Raf'a al-Yadayn? You know, from these two aspects, and also a third aspect, which is another aspect in Usool al-Fiqh, is that those that say you do Raf'a al-Yadayn, the same issue as before, we're affirming a new ruling. Because the asal in any ibadah is that you don't do it unless there's a dalil. So now we're affirming an ibadah. Whereas Ibn Mas'ud is negating it. And that which is affirming, then that is given precedence over that which is negating. And we're going to take this in the next chapter as well. Now, so anyways, this is regarding the second type, which is if you have two khas dalils. The third, the contradiction between a specific and a general text. Okay, so the specific will make the general also specific, and this is quite straightforward. So you have one general and one specific. This is quite straightforward. The general, we keep it as general in all the scenarios, but that which is specific, we give the specific, we affirm the specific ruling for that specific scenario. Okay, an example is of which the Prophet is saying a tenth of what the sky waters. So if you have, this is a bit of zakah, but if you have crop and so on, how much of that crop do you have to give? You give a tenth. Okay, I know, you know, when you say 2.5, that's normally for your money and so on, but in terms of zara'ah, in terms of plants and so on, you give a tenth. And then another hadith where he said anything less than 5 awsaq. Awsaq is a type of measurement, and if I'm not mistaken, one wisq is 60 sa'. 60 sa'. So that means 5 awsaq is 300 sa'. It works out to 300 sa'. Then how much is 300 sa'? Nowadays, I can't remember the exact conversion rate, but ala kulli hal, it's a type of measurement. So Prophet said less than 5 awsaq, there's no zakah. Okay, so what do we do? So in regards to a person who has less than 5 awsaq, whatever that measurement may be, don't worry about it, how much it is right now, but whatever that may be, if he has less than 5 awsaq and it's part of his zara'a, part of agriculture and his plants and so on, does he have to give a tenth of that? Yes or no? Let's read what the Shaykh says. He says, so the first narration is made specific with the second, and the zakah is not obligatory for anything not reaching 5 awsaq. So as long as he doesn't reach that amount, he doesn't have to give anything. He doesn't have to give anything. Only once he reaches this amount, then this other hadith applies. So this hadith is general in all scenarios, except if a person has less than 5 awsaq. Okay, except if a person has less than 5 awsaq. So inshallah, this I think is quite straightforward, and inshallah, this makes sense, inshallah. If you move on to the next, is that the ta'arud is between two texts, is that one of them is more general in one way than the other and more specific in another way, and this is 3 cases. Okay, so you know, as we go through the examples, it'll make a lot more sense, inshallah. The first is that the evidence makes specific the generality of one of them, so it becomes specific. Okay, let's take the example and inshallah it'll make a lot more sense. The first ayah is وَالَّذِينَ يَتَوَفَّوْنَ مِنكُمْ وَيَذَرُونَ أَزْوَاجًا يَتَرَبَّصْنَ بِأَنفُسِهِنَّ أَرْبَعَةَ أَشْهُرٍ وَعَشْرًا. And those who are taken in death among you and leave wives behind, the wives shall wait 4 months and 10 days. Meaning, if a wife's husband passes away, then the wife has to wait 4 months and 10 days before she can remarry. So in one instance this is am, and one way it is am, and another way it is khas. It is am in the sense that it is for it includes every type of wife, whether she is pregnant or not. And I'm saying the word pregnant because that's what the next ayah is talking about. So this ayah doesn't specify if she's pregnant or not pregnant. And it is khas, talking about that woman whose husband passes away. So it's not any other scenario whether the husband is lost, the husband divorces her, khula is taken place. It is khas for one scenario, which is that the husband passes away. So this first ayah, it is am in one sense and it is khas in another sense. It is am in the sense that it includes all types of women, whether she is pregnant or not, but it is khas in the sense that it is referring to the husband who passes away. That's the first ayah. The second ayah is basically, kind of the opposite. وَوَلَاتَ الْأَحْمَالِ أَجْلُهُنَّ أَنْ يَضَعْنَ حَمْلَهُنَّ. Okay, the second, and for those who are pregnant, their term is until they give birth. So this ayah is khas because it's only talking about pregnant women. It's only talking about pregnant women. But when it comes to the iddah, it is am because it includes those women whose husband have passed away or have given talaq or whatever the case may be. So let's just recap. I might even write this down, which I'm not able to annotate, am I? Okay. If you write this down, inshallah, it'll make a lot more sense. And I know it might be a bit tricky, so I'm going a bit slow with this. The first ayah, it is khas, specific, regarding whose husband passed away. But it is am for any type of woman, pregnant or not. The second ayah, it is khas for only the pregnant woman, but it is am for the way the way she is not the way she is widowed, whether it's by talaq or whether it's by the husband passing away. Okay. Where is the contradiction? Where is the contradiction here is now regarding a woman whose husband passes away and is hamil and is pregnant. The woman who's pregnant and her husband passes away. That in that particular scenario, that's where the contradiction overlaps. That's where the contradiction overlaps. Because the first ayah is telling you, because the husband passed away, it should be 4 months and 10 days. But the second ayah is telling us because she is pregnant, it's until she gives birth, But what you do, we have a dalil, we have another dalil, and that's what the Shaykh means here. The evidence makes. So there's another evidence which allows us to do takhsis of the first ayah with the second ayah. It allows us to use the second ayah to make the first ayah a bit more khas. The am part in the first ayah, we can make that a bit more khas. Okay? And what that means is that even though the first ayah was am, talking about a woman who is pregnant and not pregnant, we can take out the one who is not pregnant. Meaning, If she's not pregnant, then it's 4 months and 10 days. But if she is pregnant, then we take the second ayah. We take the second ayah, and her time is until she gives birth. So, and I'll mention the dalil in a second, but the conclusion of this is that a woman who is pregnant and her husband passes away, then her iddah is until she gives birth. Her iddah is until she gives birth. And the dalil for this is that Subay'ah al-Aslamiyah, she gave birth after the death of her husband by only a number of nights. So it's not like months, only a number of nights. And after she did so, the Prophet ﷺ gave her permission to marry again. So in this dalil is that the Prophet did not wait for 4 months and 10 days. And that's narrated in Bukhari and Muslim. That's narrated in Bukhari and Muslim. Okay, let's read what the Shaykh has said. I'll give another example as well. The Shaykh says the first ayah specific about is mention of widows by the husband's passing, but general when it comes to pregnant women, meaning includes pregnant and non-pregnant. It's general. The second was specific about pregnant women, but general about widows. So the proof shows that the generality of the first one. So this proof, which is the narration of Subay'ah, this proof shows that the generality of the first one is made specific by the second one. What's the generality? Pregnant women. So it includes pregnant and not pregnant women, but we've made it specific to non-pregnant women, the first ayah. And as for pregnant women, we're going the ruling of the second ayah. And that's because Subay'ah al-Aslamiyah gave birth after her husband died by a few nights, and the Prophet allowed her to get married. Based on this, the iddah time period the woman has to wait before she can marry again for the pregnant woman is when she gives birth, whether she is a widow or otherwise. A better translation is not whether she is a widow, otherwise, but just as a widow, or otherwise. That might be a better, because the Shaykh says kal mutallaqa, just as a widow or otherwise. Let's give another example of this, because I know it can be a little bit tricky. That how is am is khas. Okay. Another example is regarding the ayah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Ali Imran, ayah number 97. Ayah number 97. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in Surah Ali Imran, ayah number 97, وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ حِجُّ الْبَيْتِ مَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا. And obligatory upon the people is to do Hajj. Simple translation. For the one who is able to do so. For the one who is able to do so. Now this ayah, it is khas about Hajj. So the ruling is about Hajj. It's khas about Hajj. But it is am in regards to the people, men and women. There's no difference, men and women. It's am. وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ, upon the people. That includes men and women. But the ruling is khas for Hajj. Right. There's another one, and on the other side we have another hadith where the Prophet ﷺ says in Bukhari and Muslim, it is not permissible for a woman, who believes in Allah on the last day, to travel the length of a day and night. Except that she has a mahram with her. So this hadith, it is khas regarding a woman. It's specific regarding a woman. But it is am in regards to the type of travel, whether it's for Hajj or for other than Hajj. It is khas regarding the woman, but it is am regarding the type of travel, whether it's for Hajj or other than Hajj. So the first one was khas for Hajj, that's obligatory to do Hajj, and it's obligatory upon, and it's am for men and women, obligatory for both. And the second is telling us that it is khas for a woman, but it is am for any type of travel. Where is the contradiction? It is regarding a woman who is able to do Hajj. So she's able to do Hajj, that's the man istata'a ilayhi sabila part of the ayah, but she does not have a mahram. So a woman who does not have a mahram who wants to do Hajj. A woman who does not have a mahram and she wants to do Hajj. Because one ayah is saying that it's obligatory upon her to do Hajj, and the other is saying it's not permissible for her to travel at all. Okay? So, what do? What's the first point? The first point is that we have to find an evidence so that we can specify the generality of one of the two examples. And in this case, we have another dalil, which allows us to use the natija, the outcome will be is that we use the hadith through takhsis. Takhsis means make khas, through takhsis of the thing which is am in the ayah. Okay, so let me mention the dalil and then I'll clarify the outcome a bit more clearer. The dalil is what's narrated by Ibn Abbas radhiyallahu anhu in Bukhari and Muslim, that a man came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. A man came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and said, "O Messenger of Allah, verily I am in such and such a battle. I've gone out for such and such a battle, and my wife has gone to do Hajj, and my wife has gone to do Hajj." So then he's asking what to do in this scenario. And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Intaliq fahjuj ma'a imratik." Go and do Hajj with your wife. Go and do Hajj with your wife. Meaning, the Prophet is telling her, don't let your wife go alone. It's not allowed for your wife to go alone. You have to go with her. So that answers this scenario that we have. That it is, so the conclusion is that it's obligatory upon a woman to do Hajj except if she can't find a mahram. Meaning, if she can't find a mahram, it's not obligatory upon her to do Hajj. It's not obligatory upon her to do Hajj. And this is one of the aqwal of the ulama, and this is the opinion of the author, rahimahullah. It's the opinion of the author, and it can be found in his other books also. So inshallah, this becomes a little bit more clearer. Yeah. So that's the first thing that we do. The second is, if we can't find a dalil to allow us to use one of them to do takhsis of the thing which is am of the other, then we don't go to nasakh. We go, because you can't do it. It's very difficult to do. It's very difficult to do nasakh in this scenario. You can't do nasakh in this scenario. So then we move on to tarjih. We move on to tarjih. We have to give preference to one of them. And this is a very important example, very famous question that is asked a lot of the time. So, but let's read. The Sheikh says, if the evidence does not make specific the generality of either one of the texts, then the most preferred view is acted upon. You do tarjih. You give preference to one of them. For example, the saying of the Prophet ﷺ, if one of you enters the mosque, let him not sit down until he prays 2 rak'at. So tahiyat al-masjid. Okay? So this is in terms of its time. Anytime you enter the masjid, you pray 2 rak'at. And it's khas, which type of salah? Just 2 rak'at of tahiyat al-masjid. So it is in the time, and it's khas regarding tahiyat al-masjid. And he's saying there is no prayer after fajr until the sun rises, and no prayer after asr until the sun goes down. These are 2 prohibited times. So after fajr salah until the sun fully rises, and after asr salah until maghrib, basically until the sun sets and fully goes down, you're not allowed to pray in those times. So the second is, who can tell me? The second is khas in what and am in what? Who can tell me? Let's try to work it. Let's see if you've got it now, inshallah. If you've understood the first, it's basically the opposite of the first.
Second is khas about the time or what? Time.
Yes. The first is khas about the time. So these specific times. Okay, and what's am here?
The type of prayer, yani which prayer are we?
Very good. The salah. So it can be Tahiyyat al-Masjid, it can be other than Tahiyyat al-Masjid. It is khas in the time and am in the salah. Very good. Very good. And who can tell me where is the contradiction now? Where is the contradiction? Which issue?
Praying in the prohibited time.
Praying Tahiyyat al-Masjid in the prohibited time.
The prohibited time, yes.
Tahiyyat al-Masjid in the prohibited time. Very good. Okay, so what do we do now? What do we do now? In this case, we don't really have a dalil that gives us an answer that we can do takhsis of one of them. So there's no hadith saying that person prayed Tahiyyat al-Masjid after Asr or something like that. All right. So what we have to do now is that we have to do tarjih to one of them. And if we do tarjih, we have to look at the murajjihat, a murajjih. And there can be many, but we'll mention one of them. And this what we can do is that we in the chapter of Am we didn't mention this, but Am is also you can say two types. Okay, let me explain this and I'll apply it here. Am, one is called Am al-Mahfuz, the preserved Am, Al-Am al-Mahfuz. And the second is Al-Am Ghayr al-Mahfuz, the Am which is not preserved. The Am which is not preserved. And what this basically means is that Am which is preserved is a general ruling which nothing is specified, it remains Am. It remains a general ruling. But Am Ghayr al-Mahfuz is an Am which is no longer preserved, meaning there are other issues which have been, which are khas, which have specified it. Okay? And in the Murajjihat we'll learn that if you have an Am which is Mahfuz and you have an Am which is Ghayr Mahfuz, which one do you give preference to? You give preference to the Am which is Mahfuz. The Am which has remained preserved, you keep it, you let it stay preserved. So in this scenario, after Asr, because we know that there are other examples which make that at the time after Asr or even at Fajr, that is no longer preserved, such as making up your salawat. You can do qada, you're allowed to do qada in these times. So in these prohibited times, you can pray qada. You can pray janazah. Okay, you can pray janazah, and you can pray other types of salawat. So because these exceptions are already given in this am, then we give preference to the first hadith, which is that if you go into the time where it's not allowed for you to pray, then regarding Tahiyyat al-Masjid, it is permissible to pray Tahiyyat al-Masjid. It is so. Which hadith do we give preference to? We give a preference to the first hadith. If one of you enters the mosque, let him not sit down until he prays 2 rak'at. We give preference to this hadith. Why? Because the am of this, which was praying in any time, that has not been affected. Whereas the am of the other, which is the am of the other, which is other types of salah that you can't pray in these specific times, that is no longer mahfuz, because there are certain types of salah which you can't pray. So even the person said there is no prayer, that's am. Okay, there's am. La salata, because salah is nakira, it's indefinite in the siyaq of nafi, in the context of negation. If you go back to the different types, how do you know something is am? So because that is no longer preserved and there are exceptions, then we allow the am which is mahfuz to remain mahfuz, and that which is already ghayr mahfuz, we add another exception into that. Inshallah, that explanation makes sense. So maybe in more simple terms without using technical terms, is that because in these prohibited times, exceptions are already there. You can pray your qada, you can pray janazah and so on. Because exceptions are already there, then we also allowed to pray Tahiyyat al-Masjid. That's why the ulama, they give more of a general ruling saying that any salah which has a reason, then you can pray in the prohibited times. Any salah which has a reason, then you can pray in prohibited times.
Even that after Fajr, sunrise, there we are saying that 15 minutes we should not allow to pray. Normally that time also we can pray Tahiyyat al-Masjid. You are saying?
You're saying though that 15 minutes when the sun is actually rising.
Yeah.
So the mazahib differ. So there are 3 times which are not permitted, which are in simple terms at Fajr, the zenith when the sun's right above your head, and the third is after Asr. Now some have split it into 5. Some have split it into 5 times, and they've separated the Fajr and Asr into 2, meaning Fajr after you prayed generally, and then the time when the sun is actually that 15 minutes, they've made that 15 minutes that you're referring to a separate time. And the reason they've done that is they say that in those 15 minutes it's not allowed, but in the others it's allowed. Okay, so because they say here it's the prohibition is a lot more extreme. So those madhahib which have split it into 5 times, okay, then according to them you will not be allowed. But then according to those who keep it 3, they say no, because it's general. This hadith, Fajr until the sun rises, it doesn't differentiate between why splitting that into 2. And like I said, I'm going to stick to this principle now because it's not a fiqh lesson. I'm not going to go into that issue. I'm not going to say which is the correct opinion or not because it's not a fiqh lesson. Okay, just understand the usuli principle. Let's see what the Shaykh says. The first is specific regarding the 2 raka'at that are prayed before sitting down in the masjid, but general about the time. The second is specific about the time, but general about the type of prayer, which includes Tahiyyat al-Masjid, 2 raka'at which are prayed before sitting down in the masjid, and other than that. But the most preferred opinion is to make specific the generality of the second, which is with the first. So it is permissible to pray Tahiyyat al-Masjid during the times that are prohibited for general prayers to be prayed therein. We prefer this opinion because making specific the generality of the second has been confirmed by other prayers besides Tahiyyat al-Masjid, such as making the obligatory prayers or praying again in congregation. So the generality has a weak position. Generality has a weak position. And subhanAllah, this issue is an issue where there is a lot of khilaf between ulama. So much so that Sheikh Muhammad al-Amin al-Shanqiti, he actually went to tawaqquf. And he said, it's too much khilaf, I can't give an opinion in this. And what he used to do, if there was a little bit of time left, if there was a little bit of time left, then he would actually stand outside the masjid. So let's say it was like 3-4 minutes left to the adhan. He would just stand out the masjid for 3-4 minutes. And then once the adhan happens, that's when he would enter. SubhanAllah. Then Shaykh al-Amin al-Shaqi, the one who wrote the tafsir Adwal al-Bayan. What if a person during Fajr reaches masjid and 5 minutes remain for fard, and should we offer Tahiyyat al-Masjid or no? If your time is running out, and you can only pray one of the 2, without that you pray fard. You pray your fard if time is running out. If you're able to pray both, generally you pray both. If you're able to pray both in that time. Okay, but now if you're asking about the prohibited time, can you pray Tahiyyat al-Masjid and fard as well? Like I said, it's a fiqh issue which I'm not going to go into. And then there's also the other issue as well. If we really make it technical, is Tahiyyat al-Masjid obligatory or not? Is it obligatory or not? I personally lean towards that it's not obligatory. But like I said, these are fiqh issues. So if you lean towards that opinion as well, then if it's an issue where you have so much doubt in, then it's not obligatory to pray. Anyways, but like I said, these are fiqh issues, and you can easily go back and forth and so on. So that's why I'm not, and we're going to stick to the principle, which is the fiqh issues. We're not going to go into a lot of detail regarding that due to time. Another example we can give for this is, which a lot easier inshallah, is the hadith narrated in Bukhari, with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Man baddala dinahu faqtuluhu." Whoever changes his religion, and kill him. Whoever apostates, kill him. And that's general, men and women. But then we have other hadiths, the hadith Ibn Umar, which is in Bukhari or Muslim, where the Prophet prohibited from killing women. So what do you do? A woman who has apostated now. one hadith saying any apostate kill, and the other saying for other hadith for some saying don't kill women. So in this case, the ulama give preference to killing the woman, killing the woman. Yeah. And the marajjihat, the reason for that is because if you look at the reasoning why we kill her, it doesn't affect whether she is a woman or a male or female. You're not killing because they're a woman. The reason the person prohibited killing women is because generally women are weak and so on. So in terms of war and stuff, you don't kill them. But in terms of this issue, we're not killing them because the fact that they're a male or female doesn't have an effect. The reason they're getting this punishment is because they have changed their religion. That's another issue. Again, we don't want to go into too much depth. The third issue.
Sheikh, Hadith, when in the Hadith you said like the Prophet ﷺ prohibited killing women. I mean, in the war or other than that?
The Hadith general, Wallahu alam. No, general. It's general. It was general now.
General, okay.
It's in Bukhari. I'll give you the number. You can read the wording itself. 3015, and a Muslim 1744. Bukhari 3015, Muslim 1744.
Jazakallah.
But generally the ulama do apply it to war. Apply it to war. So for example, they want it's outside of war right now. So this example is outside of war. A woman who apostates, but the ulama don't apply it here. Why? Because here there's no difference between a man and a woman. No. Now the Shaykh says, however, it is not possible for there. No, 1 second. However, it is not possible for there to be a contradiction between texts of the same issue in a way that the cannot be reconciled. That it cannot be reconciled, or that one of them is abrogating the other, or that one cannot be given preference over the other because the texts do not contradict each other. The Prophet has made things perfectly clear and propagated the message. So it may be that the mujtahid fell short in his understanding of the text, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. No, I mean, that's just finishing off with the point that we have mentioned previously. Now here it says the order between evidences. This is actually, I mean, the Arabic version is a different chapter. In the Arabic version, it's a different chapter. But it does make sense to add it into the same chapter because we are talking about contradictions and so on. And what this is basically talking about is that it's giving each dalil its proper place in terms of strength. And this can also be, the murajjihat that we were talking about, those factors that allow us to give preference to one proof over another. This is what it's talking about. Okay, so for example, if you had a clear ayah which goes against qiyas, for example, which one do you give preference to? We learned before, Quran is given preference over qiyas, right? So this is what it's talking about. And if you want to talk about proofs generally, okay, then we can say that proofs generally have 3 states. Proofs generally, and when we're talking about here, we're talking about mainly the Quran, which is the strongest, and then Sunnah, and then Ijma' and Qiyas. Okay, and some ulama have in terms of strength, some ulama have said that Ijma' is stronger than Quran and Sunnah. Not, I mentioned this last time, not because speech of people give preference over Quran and Sunnah. It's because firstly, Ijma' is taken from the Quran and Sunnah, and secondly, it's because if you bring an ayah, there's a possibility there's another ayah contradicting it, or there's a hadith contradicting it, or the meaning something else, or it's mansukh and so on. But Ijma', once it takes place, it's a haqq, and those possibilities are not there. Okay, so in terms of strength, and this is based upon the Quran and Sunnah anyway, so you're not really giving a preference over Quran and Sunnah. Ala kulli hal, proofs generally they have three states. Either two proofs agree with each other, and that's fine. We give it the same ruling. Okay. Or two separate rulings, but there's no contradiction. There's no contradiction. That's also fine. You know, then whatever this is talking about, you give it that ruling. Whatever this one is talking about, you give it that ruling. But it's the third state that we are talking about. The third state that we are talking about, which is that when they seem to be contradictory. When they seem to be contradictory. And the general principle in this is that if they seem contradictory, first you do jama', you reconcile between them. You reconcile between them. And if you're not able to reconcile, then you move to naskh, you move to abrogation, if you know the date. And if you can't do naskh, then you do tarjih. Then you do tarjih, the way we've been talking about. This, what I mentioned here right now, is basically a summary of everything we have taken previously. Obviously, it's a bit more detailed, but this is basically a summary. And this, what we're talking about now, the order between evidences, is talking about the different ways of doing tarjih, the different ways of doing tarjih. And there is a general principle regarding these murajjihat. What's the general principle? The general principle is that you give preference to the most strongest proof. You give preference to the most strongest proof. That's it. That's the general principle. So when we say we give tarjih to this because these murajjihat, these factors is what make it the strongest. So that's the general principle. If somebody says to you, why are we giving preference to this hadith over this hadith? It's because this is the strongest. Okay? And then, okay, why is it the strongest? And then you mention the murajjihat. So that's like a general one. Now again, the Shaykh hasn't mentioned all of them. He's not mentioned all of them. But he has mentioned the main ones, inshallah. And this is mainly to do with Quran, Sunnah, Ijma' and Qiyas. Mainly to do with these. And even in the book, the Shaykh has mainly talked about these adillah. When you get to the bigger books, then there are other secondary adillah as well. Other secondary adillah. Now, I don't want to confuse you too much. Remind me later. Once I finish this chapter, then I'll mention the secondary adillah, inshallah. But right now, the Shaykh is mainly talking about the Quran, the Sunnah, Ijma' and then Qiyas. So let's see what the Shaykh says. He says, when the evidences mentioned previously, the Quran, Sunnah, consensus, and analogy, agree on a ruling, or one of them does not, one of them does, without contradicting the other sources of evidences, then affirming it is compulsory. Okay, I'll just explain this, right? If there is a contradiction and it is possible to reconcile them, then that is what must be done. If that is not the case, then the abrogating text should be acted upon if the conditions are met. If all of that is not possible, then one text must be given preference. Okay. From the Quran and Sunnah, the following should be given preference. Okay. Now he says from Quran and Sunnah, but the Shaykh does give examples of Ijma' and Qiyas. So he's talking about mainly these. He's not talking about the other adillah, which are differed upon and not mentioned. So the first thing is that the Shaykh, what he's saying is that the apparent, and this is insufficient translation. What he means, he says text, and again, with the Usool fiqh, to be very precise, use the Arabic words here. Use the Arabic words because now you know what they mean. It'll make a lot more sense. You give preference to a nas over a zahir. A nas over a zahir. Okay, and I'm not going to spend too long on these. Those which I think are quite straightforward, we're just going to move on. Those which require a bit of explanation, I might mention example for that. And nas, remember we said nas is a word which only has one meaning. Okay, and then al-zahir is like two meanings, but one is more stronger, basically. So which one? If two are contradictory, one meaning is nas and the other is al-zahir. Which one? Nas, because nas, there's no other meaning. This is the meaning 100%. The other, this is a possibility it could be wrong. So you give preference of nas over al-zahir. And by the way, all the ones the Shaykh mentioning right now, it's all to do with the matan, the text. So if it's hadith, it's to do with the text. That's what he's mentioning, basically. From the Quran and Sunnah, he's talking about text. He's not really talking about sanad. Sanad is going to come a bit later on. The second is al-zahir ala al-mu'awwal الظاهر على المؤول. Okay, see, Sheikh, the translator used mu'awwal, but he didn't use the word zahir. Okay, and we took this. Mu'awwal is the weaker meaning, but it can be given preference to if there's another dalil. Now, if there is a dalil, that's fine. But if there's no dalil, then obviously you give preference to the zahir. You give preference to the zahir. The third is that which is actually stated or spoken over that which is understood. This is not something we've taken in the book. This is not something that we've taken. This is also talked about, and this is not we talked about at the end of the chapter of Am. And this in Arabic is you give preference to al-mantuq over al-mafhum. Al-mantuq over al-mafhum. Al-mantuq is the meaning which is literally said. It's the wording clearly gives that meaning. Al-mafhum is like what you've understood. So the exact word, it doesn't say that, but you've understood from the wording that this is the meaning. Now, because you haven't taken this before, let me give you an example of that. So let's use the hadith that we mentioned previously in the previous lessons of Aisha radiallahu anha, where she said, كان فيما أنزل من القرآن 10 رضاعات معلومات يحرمنا ثم نسخنا بخمس معلومات. That what was revealed in the Quran initially was that 10 suckles in breastfeeding makes it haram, i.e. establishes a ruling and it doesn't allow you to, it makes you brother and sister with the other people who have been breastfed. So the first is 10, and then it was abrogated to 5. So she is saying it's 5. She from the wording, it's quite clear. She is saying, because she said about yahrumna or yuharrimna, that if it's 5, then the ruling is established. So breastfeeding is done with 5. It's in the wording. But then there is another hadith of Prophet. Now, if you do remember when I did mention this, I tried to make sure that I didn't say 100% that it's 5, because it's another hadith and there's a bit of khilaf in this issue. And like I said, we're not going to go into fiqh issues. I just want you to understand the usul al-fiqh principles. There's another hadith of Prophet, and this hadith is in Sahih Muslim, where the Prophet said, لا تحرموا ولا تحرموا المصة والمصتان. 1 or 2 suckles does not make it haram. 1 or 2 suckles does not make it haram. In other simple terms, is that the rulings of breastfeeding is not established by 1 or 2 suckles. Okay, that's the literal wording. The understanding is that the third one does. The understanding is that the third one does. Right? Does that make sense? These are hadith. So the first one, Aisha is clearly saying that it was first 10 and now it's 5. The ruling is established 5. This hadith is telling us that 1 and 2 doesn't make it haram. It doesn't establish the ruling of breastfeeding. Okay, that's the wording. Right? What do you understand? If 1 and 2 doesn't, then the third one will. Right? Does that make sense? Does that mean in the chat? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. In this case, if you have to do tarjih between the two, which one will you give preference to? The ulama would say you give preference to the first. Why? Because that is clearly spoken ruling, whereas the second is understanding. Because in the understanding, okay, the Prophet said the first and second doesn't, but technically he didn't negate it from the third as well, or the fourth, or the fifth, right? So because the first one clearly mentions the wording mentions the ruling, then that is given preference over that which is understood. And inshallah, that makes sense. The fourth is the affirming text over the negating one. So if one is affirming something, the Prophet did this, and the other is saying no, is negating something, then the one which is affirming is given preference. So, and this in many examples, sometimes Aisha would say the Prophet never did this. Okay, and in some other Sahaba would say, I saw the Prophet do this. Which one do you give preference to? You give preference to that which is affirming. You give preference to that which is affirm, because affirming has more knowledge. Maybe if I remember correctly, the time where Aisha anha said that the Prophet never did this, I think it was regarding urinating standing up. She said, I think if I'm not mistaken, she said that whoever says the Prophet has stood up and urinated, then they have lied about the Prophet. Okay, but there are other narrations, like Huzaifa and others who have narrated that he saw the Prophet urinating while standing up. Okay, and that's how the ruling is that it's permissible to stand up and urinate even though even though we say it's better to sit down, but it's permissible as long as your aura is fully covered, no one can see you, and you are safe from any splashbacks from urine and so on. So if you know that nothing's going to come back on your clothes and stuff, then the ulama, some of the fuqaha say it is allowed because it has been narrated by Prophet this stand up. Now, in this case, Aisha saying never, and other Sahaba saying yes. We say that yes, the Prophet did. We give preference to this because this is affirming a ruling. And a reason for this is because Aisha wasn't with the Prophet 24/7 every single day. Most of the time, maybe at home and so on. But there were times where she wasn't there. So maybe that time when she wasn't there, another companion saw, and she didn't see. So she can only go off what she knows, obviously. Anyways, the point being is that which is affirming something is given preference over that which is negating something. The fifth, the one narrating the primary source, i.e. the original ruling, the asl, okay, the original ruling, is and what has been maintained because he has more knowledge. Okay, that translation doesn't really make sense. It's an-naqil an al-asl. An-naqil an al-asl in Arabic is the one that takes you away from the primary ruling, from the original ruling, from the original ruling. So if you are
الناقل على الأصل شيخ.
الناقل عن الأصل, because naqala means to transmit or to take something. So this is transmitted or taken you away from the original ruling. Okay. So الناقل عن الأصل. So if you have original ruling, that generally in all cases something is haram, but then there's one hadith saying that in this specific state it is allowed. Or maybe not. Let's say one hadith is saying something that person. In one hadith, I don't want to mention that because the example I've got is a bit. It's gonna. I don't want to go into it too much. But let's say one hadith is saying that this didn't happen, and that stays with the general rulings. The asl, okay. But one hadith is affirming that no, actually this did take place, which goes against the original ruling that is normally known. Which one do you give preference in this case? In this case, you give preference to that which goes against the asl, that which goes against the base ruling or the original ruling, because they say, Sheikh says, because he has more knowledge. This is something extra, is more knowledgeable. And this is the majority of the Usooliyun take this principle. The majority of the Usooliyun, they take this principle. The next point is...
Sheikh, sorry, Sheikh. Fourth point, Sheikh, you told affirming test has more preference over negating one. So regarding the earlier two hadiths where you mentioned Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam married in the state of, not married in the state of Ihram, and other hadiths married in the state of Ihram. The not married is negating, and that gave preference, no, actually, in that case.
They're not negating person married, they're negating whether he was in the state of Ihram or not. But I understand what you're saying, and it's very good. One could use that, but we don't go to that because we have other proofs. And the other proofs is that Maymuna radiallahu anha, she herself narrated the hadith, so she would know what happened. And there's also a supporting narration. There's another supporting narration that also proves that she did it while Prophet was not in the state of Ihram, and then also because Ibn Abbas was younger. So the reason we give preference to that is because of these other reasons. If those other reasons weren't there, then I understand. Okay. Obviously, these points that we are mentioning is that if it's just like that, if there's other things as well, then you have to add them all together and weigh it up. And obviously that's going to get a lot more complicated. So we don't need to make it too complicated right now. But it's a good question, and it's good that you've noticed that. And alhamdulillah, it's a good sign that you guys are understanding the usul al-fiqh. Alhamdulillah. The number 6, the preserved general text, where the generality has not been specific over the general, which is not mahfuz, preserved. See, subhanAllah, he's using the Arabic sometimes, sometimes not. But this is what we mentioned previously, is that al-am al-mahfuz is give preference over al-am ghayr al-mahfuz. The next is which has more description of being accepted than the other. This is general. And this is, you could say it's more talking about the sanad. I'm not talking about the sanad now, this one. So any hadith which has more characteristics of acceptance, i.e. which is more authentic or shows that it's more correct and so on, then that would be given preference over that which is not the case. So easy example, one hadith is sahih, the other is da'if. Which one do you give preference to? Obviously that which is sahih. Number 8, the person of the story in question over someone else. That's the example of Maymuna radiallahu anha that we gave. From consensus or not ijma', al-qat'i is given preference over al-dhanni. That ijma' which is qat'i is given preference over ijma' which is dhanni. However, to be honest, don't think there can be an example because two ijma's can't really go against one another. So I don't know of an example of that. And qiyas, the clear over the hidden. Qiyas al-jali over qiyas al-khafi. Qiyas al-jali over qiyas al-khafi. And to be honest, I don't know an example of that either. But so these are just some of the ways. Inshallah, it makes sense. Some of the ways, or some of the marjihat. Why would you give preference to one over the other? And these are some of them. There are many others, and some are differed upon. Some not every single Usuli agrees with. Some, some are different on the madhahib. So some madhahib take certain ones, and some madhahib don't accept others. So there's khilaf, but this is general, just for you guys to understand. What we have mentioned is generally what a majority of the Usuliyun do take. Right, now we'll take a little break, inshallah. Now we've just got literally, I think, 3 chapters left, and they're all to do with one topic, to do with ijtihad and giving fatwa and anything to do with that. We'll take a 7-minute break. We'll start again at 5:02, inshallah. So I'll see everyone that's in about 5-6 minutes, inshallah. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad. Okay, inshallah, everybody is back. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala Nabi Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. So now we're talking about al-Mufti wal-Mustafti, the Mufti and the Mustafti. Mufti, the Shaykh, he says, the Mufti is the one who has knowledge of the legal rulings, and the Mustafti is a questioner that asks for a legal ruling. Now, so a Mufti is somebody who comes, when we say legal, it means Islamic, Shari'i, Islamic, yeah? So, a Mufti is one who has knowledge of, or somebody who informs. See, the translation is a bit different. Arabic is al-Mukhbir, the one who informs regarding the Islamic ruling. And obviously the Mustafti is the one who is questioning. So when you have a question, there's a Mufti and there's somebody asking. So the one who is asking is known as Mustafti, and the one giving the answer is Mufti. And generally in Arabic, you have alif, sin, ta, alif, sin, ta. The alif is hidden here. But even like istighfar, isti'ana, and so on, the alif, sin, ta has like a similar meaning, which means talib, like a request, or you want something. So Mustafti, you want a fatwa. Istighfar, you want forgiveness. Isti'ana, you are seeking Allah's help, and so on. And there's one issue which is talked about as well, which is a qada, which is being a judge, right? And what's the difference between a mufti and a judge? And there's a few small differences. The first difference is that a judge, when he gives a ruling, it becomes mandatory. You have to follow that ruling. Whereas a mufti, that's not the case. A mufti, that is not the case. And generally, the mufti, he is looking into the affairs of the people, whereas a mustafti, he's looking into the proofs. Sorry, a mufti, sorry, no, mufti, he's looking into the proofs. So a judge, he will, based on whatever the people are saying, you did this, you did that, okay, you're on this ruling, okay, you have to pay this, or you know, whatever the punishment, or this is your punishment. That's what the judge does. Whereas a mufti, he's looking at the proofs. Okay, Quran says this, ayah says this, hadith says this, right? This scenario, this is the ruling. However, both of them, if done correctly and in sincerely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's a great reward in both. But likewise, the dangers are very grave as well. And subhanAllah, I think we should stop and also point out that if you look at the Salaf, and even from the Sahaba, radiallahu anhum, they would actually try their best to turn away from giving fatwa. They would not like to give fatwa at all. In fact, they would give it to one another. And they were very hastening when it came to attributing ignorance to themselves. Ibn Abdul Barr in his book Jami' Bayan al-Ilm wa Fadlih, he narrates that Zayd ibn Arqam, and also Al-Bara ibn Azib, radiallahu anhuma, that a man came and he asked them a question regarding sarf. Sarf is basically an issue in transactions. And both of them, Zayd and Bara, they would tell him to go ask the other person. They would say, Sal al-akhar, ask the other. فَإِنَّهُ خَيْرٌ مِّنِّي وَأَعْلَمُ, for verily he is better than me and more knowledgeable than me. And Ibn Abdul Barr also narrates that Abdurrahman ibn Abi Layla, he said, I met 120 of the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I met 120 of the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and not one of them, except when he was asked about something, he would hope, better translation would be, there's not one man from them who was asked a question except that he would wish that his brother would answer. SubhanAllah. So 120 companions, whenever they asked a question, all of them would wish that they don't answer and their brother, another companion, would answer instead. Ibn Hamdan in his book Sifatu al-Fatwa, he says And if the companions of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would find it hard when they were asked questions and they were not given answer until they would take the opinion of their companion, whilst they were granted the guidance and good thinking, with also the fact that they had pure hearts, then what about us? What about us when our hearts have been covered with the veil of sins? And in another narration, Ibn Abdul Barr also narrates regarding Al-Qasim ibn Muhammad, who is from the Fuqaha al-Sab'a. Fuqaha al-Sab'a is a term which translates to the 7 jurists. In the time of the Tabi'een, there were 7 main Fuqaha in Medina at the time who would give answers, and he was one of them. And a man came to him and asked him a question, and he said, I'm not good with this. I don't know the answer. So this man said, Inni la a'rifu ghayrak. I don't know other than you. Who else shall I go to? So Al-Qasim said, La tanzur ila tuli lihyati. Don't look at how long my beard is. Wa kathratu nasi hawli. And how many people are around me. Wallahi ma ahsinu. By Allah, I am not good at this. ثم قال, then he said, Wallahi la an yaqta'a lisani ahabba ilayya min an atakallama bima la ilma li bih. Verily by Allah, for my tongue to be cut is more beloved to me than me to speak about that which I have no knowledge of. Verily by Allah, for my tongue to be cut is more beloved to me than for me to speak in regards to that which I have no knowledge. Because for him to speak without no knowledge is a major sin. But for his tongue to be cut, then he's not falling into sin. Abu Dawud, the one who wrote Sunan Abu Dawud, he said, ما أحصي ما سمعت أحمد يسأل عن كثير مما فيه اختلاف من العلم فيقول لا أدري. Now I can't even count the amount of times that I've heard Imam Ahmad when he was asked about issues that have khilaf. I can't even count the amount of times that he would say La adri, I do not know. And the stories of La adri are so many, which we don't have time to mention, but they are found in the books of ulama. The story of Imam Malik, when a man traveled from far, asked him 40 questions and he only answered about 6 of them, and to the rest he said he didn't know. So this man said, what shall I say to my people? And he said, get on your horse and tell the people Imam Malik said he doesn't know. And then we also have Umar radiallahu anhu, Hadith Jibreel, he said, Allah wa Rasuluhu a'lam, Allah and His Messenger know best. Even Prophet in the same hadith, Mal Masulu anha bi'alam min as-sa'il, Prophet basically saying that he doesn't know. The angels, قالوا لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا. Allah, we have no knowledge except that which you have taught us, and so on. So saying, I don't know, and not wanting to answer questions is a very important topic which should be stressed, and a person should implement into his life. That just because he's asked a question doesn't mean that he should always answer. And he shouldn't hasten to love to answer questions and so on. And there's many athar, many aqwal of the ulama regarding not hastening to answer, and regarding saying I do not know when they don't know an answer. Some have said that it's half of knowledge, because knowledge either you know or you don't know. And if you don't know, if you say that you don't know, then at least that way you know that you don't know, so you can learn. As for a person who thinks he knows, then he will not learn, and so on. Anyways, the Sheikh, he says the conditions of fatwa. So when a fatwa is to be given, then some conditions should be there. The first is the requirements for the permissibility of a fatwa. Now the conditions are 2 types. Firstly, when it's permissible to give fatwa, and the second is when it's obligatory to give fatwa. So there might be times when a mufti is asked a question, it's obligatory, he has to answer. And there are times where it's just permissible. So firstly, the Shaykh is going to talk about when it is permissible, and then he's going to talk about when it is obligatory. So he says, and most of this is quite straightforward. So inshallah, we can just read, and it's not fiqh issues I have to explain. So most of it is just self-explanatory, apart from a couple of examples. Now, the Shaykh, he says, the requirements for the permissibility of a fatwa, which if they are not met, then the correct fatwa will not be obtained. Meaning it's not permissible to give that fatwa then. Number 1, and it won't be a correct fatwa either, even if it's given. Number 1, the Mufti have certainty of knowledge of a judgment or overwhelming notion, otherwise he must withhold from issuing any fatwa. So when a person is giving an answer, he should either have 100% certain, or he should have a dhann al-rajih, or a dhann al-ghalib, or ghalabat al-dhann. There's different ways of saying. If you remember in the beginning of the book, towards the beginning, we talked about the different stages of knowledge, and one of them was dhann. Dhann is when you have two possibilities, you can take the stronger possibility. And now this is one of the places where it comes handy. Basically, dhann, but not any type of dhann. A very high level of dhann. That's an overwhelming notion. So it's not just two possibilities, and it could be any, like 51% to 99%. No, not the whole thing. When you are like nearly 100% sure, it's like towards 90% sure on the answer, only then you can give an answer. So even if you are 60% sure, or you're 50% sure, or you're 40%, then you can't give an answer. And the reason they say it's permissible to give it with an overwhelming notion, which is ghalabat al-dhann, like 90% approximately, you know, I'm not going to give an exact number, but just for understanding, is because, you know, it's very difficult in reality for you to say to a person, you have to have 100% knowledge and 100% certainty. Especially those issues that have khilaf, you know, it's very difficult for a person to say 100% this is the correct answer. It's very, very, you know, hard to say, especially those issues that have a lot of khilaf in. But, you know, we can say that we see this to be the strongest opinion, and this is what we lean towards, and most, inshallah, this is the correct opinion. This is ghalabat al-dhann. So as long as the person, the mufti, he has to have either 100% or which is ilm, or ilm al-yaqeen, certainty, or ghalabat al-dhann. Otherwise, tawaqquf, he's not allowed to give an answer. So if he's could be this, could be that, then he can't give an answer. Okay. Number 2, because otherwise he's speaking without knowledge. Otherwise he is speaking without knowledge. The second, he says the question must fully be understood to be able to judge him, because judging something is a part of conceptualizing it. Basically, the Mufti has to understand the question properly. The Mufti has to understand the question fully. And if the questioner doesn't explain it fully, he has to ask those questions to the questioner so that he has a full picture. And then the Sheikh said, because judging something is a part of conceptualizing it, that's a famous statement in Arabic. Al-hukmu ala shay far'un an tasawwurihi. Al-hukmu ala shay far'un an tasawwurihi. Meaning, if you don't do tasawwur, if you don't fully understand it first, then you can't give an answer. Okay, because you can't give an answer. So a proper translation of this statement, al-hukmu ala shay, judging upon something, is a branch of concepts, as is mentioned here. Okay, that's a literal one. But what that basically means is that if you don't fully understand something, then you can't give an answer, you can't give a judgment. And that's why in our exams, our teachers used to say that understanding the question is half of the answer. Like, if you don't understand the question, you could write a whole essay, yeah. But if you've written about not answering the question, you've written an answer for a different question, you're not going to get the marks, are you? So similar here. And the Shaykh, he's going to give an example of that. So he says, when you find difficulty with what the questioner has asked, and if it needs further explaining, more detail should be sought, or that it is mentioned in the answer itself. In the answer itself, meaning if the questioner gives an answer, gives a question and it's not 100% clear, then either the Mufti asks, do you mean this or do you mean this? Or the Mufti says that, okay, if you meant this, then this is the answer. If you meant this, then this is the answer. So either you ask, or the Mufti himself just gives the answer. Now the Shaykh is going to give an example. Now this example is regarding inheritance. If you've not studied inheritance, it will be difficult to understand the intricate details of it. But I'll give you the general meaning so you understand, inshallah. Let's read it first. So if someone dies and leaves behind a daughter, a brother, and an uncle, ask about the brother. Was he from the mother or not? Meaning, is he a full brother from the same mother and father? Or is he your brother, stepbrother from your father's side? Or is he a stepbrother from your mother's side? So ask about the brother. Was he from the mother or not? That's what it means, because each one has a different ruling. Or make the distinction in the answer. So if he was from the mother, then there is nothing for him in inheritance, and the remainder after what belongs to the daughter is for the uncle. And if he is from another mother, then what's left after the daughter takes what's hers is for him. The point being is that there's a difference. Meaning, if he if he is your brother, stepbrother from your mother's side, meaning the father is somebody else, okay, so maybe they got married before and now the wife, your mother divorced him and married somebody else who's now is your father, for example. So it's from your mother's side. It's a half brother. If it's from the mother's side, then he has a certain ruling. If he's not from the mother's side, he's from the father's side, or is a full brother, like normally would be the case, especially amongst our communities, I think, then the ruling is different. So you have to Mufti has to fully understand the scenario. And the third is that he must be of a calm mind, giving him time to think about the issue and implement the legal evidences. So he should not issue fatwas or fatawa while in the state of being angry or preoccupied or even bored. And we talked about this before, or even if he's constipated or if he's dying to go to the bathroom and so on. So these three conditions that we mentioned, if they are not there, it's not permissible for him to give a fatwa at all. Okay, if these are there, then it's permissible for him to give a fatwa. Now, there are other conditions regarding the mufti himself. What makes a person a mufti? But that will come later. That's going to come shortly, inshallah. But this is generally, if a person is a mufti, when can he and when can't he? The following conditions have to be stipulated for a fatwa to be necessary, obligatory. Number one, the incident in question has actually taken place. So a person has come to you, this has happened, what do I do? I've said this to my wife, is there talaq, is there not? I need to know, otherwise, if it is a talaq and I stay with her, then I'm committing zina because she's not my wife, and so on, right? So if it has taken place, then he has to give it. If it's a question like, what if this happens, or what in the future this happens, then they don't have to. If so the Shaykh says, if it hasn't, then it is not obligatory for a fatwa to be issued. However, a question is asked for the purpose of seeking knowledge, then it is not permissible to hide it. Rather, it must be answered whenever it is asked in any conditions. Now, if it doesn't take place, it's not obligatory. And you find many aqwal of the ulama regarding this as well. That if it's not taken place, then many don't even give answers. Umar radiallahu anh, he said, إِيَّاكُمْ وَهَذِهِ الْعُضَلِ, that beware of these udal. Udal is from the word mu'dal. If you know Mustalah Hadith, you know what mu'dal Hadith is. It's a similar meaning. But it's basically referring to those issues which haven't taken place yet. That have not taken place yet. So he says, I warn you of these udal. فَإِنَّهَا إِذَا نَزَتْ بَعَثَ اللَّهُ إِلَيْهَا مَنْ يُقِيمَهَا وَيُفَسِّرُهَا. For verily, if it does take place, then Allah will send those who will establish it, i.e. its ruling, and explain it. As Zayd bin Thabit radiallahu anh, he would never give an answer with his opinion until he would ask, has it happened or not? And if it hasn't happened, then he will not speak about it. Maybe an exception to this is that if something hasn't taken place, but you know it will take place, then you can ask if you know it will take place. And that's why you find many of the Sahaba asking about Ad-Dajjal and asking about Huzaifa would ask about fitna and so on. So if you know it's going to take place, so we know that Ad-Dajjal is going, we don't know when, but we know he is going to come, then asking questions regarding that, that's fine, because you know it's going to happen. As for so many questions in scenarios, hypothetical scenarios which are not going to take place, it shouldn't be done. Except, what did the Shaykh said? Except if it's for the purpose of seeking knowledge. Person wants to learn, then the Shaykh says it's not permissible to hide it. Okay, we're talking about fatwa. Some people go to an alim and asking fatwa, this fatwa, like, then no. But it's for learning, then yeah. Because then in the future, if something does take place, that person who's learned, he's going to be the one that people are going to go to, right? But even with that, we can even do taqeed and restrict, make it muqayyad, what the Shaykh has said. It's not permissible to hide it, but we could say we should look at the state of the student, the state or the level of the student, the state or the level of the student. So for example, a student doesn't know the basics of Salah, and he's asking about khilaf in this issue and this issue and this issue. The teacher can say to him, don't worry, learn what's the important things first, and learn usul al-fiqh more, so that when you get to the bigger issues, you'll understand them a lot better. As for right now, you won't really understand them. So something like that, that's called tadarruj. Likewise in Aqeedah, a person doesn't know the basics, but he wants to know how to refute so-and-so, just for the sake of it. We say relax, those issues can come later. Learn that which is more important for now. So leveling up at tadarruj that should be taken into consideration. And there's many aqwal, this all of the ulama, what they all do. In fact, the statement of Ibn Abbas when he comments on the ayah, وَلَكِنْ كُونُوا رَبَّانِيِّينَ, he says, what does it mean be nurturing? He says that they are those ulama that teach the small knowledge before the big knowledge. The small knowledge before the big knowledge, i.e. at-tadarruj. Now, point number 2, that it is not known from the conditions of the questioner that he intends by questioning to annoy or look for answers that allow him a free pass to do whatever he wants, or that he is looking to cause the opinions of the scholars to clash with each other, or any other evil intent. If that is the case, then no fatwa needs to be given. So if it's taken place and you know that this person is asking you, he does not have any evil intention, he wants the right answer, he wants the haqq, then you give him the answer. But if you know this person is asking to cause any evil intention, to either ask hard question, that, or like I've asked a hard question to try to show his knowledge, or try to cause problems for the mufti, or he trying to follow the Sheikh, like the translate a free pass, that he wants to have one person that allows him to do this so that he can do it, so he's just following his desires, and that's called tatabbu' al-rukhas. Tatabbu' al-rukhas is following these rukhas, these way outs, you could say. Okay, those things which Sharia has made easy, like when you're traveling, you can combine and so on, that's fine. But these people are looking for even the straightforward, clear issues. Every issue they want to make it easy, they want to find a way out of this. Smoking, they want it halal, this one halal, this they want the halal. Doing that's muharram, that's not allowed by ijma'. Or maybe a person asks a question because he wants to see what this scholar says and weigh up with this scholar. But Sheikh, this scholar said this and this scholar said this, so he wants to do something like that, then that is also considered a evil intention. Or he just wants to show that I've asked a question, or I've got this much knowledge, or the Sheikh said this, but I was able to mention this hadith. All of these are evil intentions. So if there's no evil intention, then it is permissible to ask. And then he says, the third is that as a result of the fatwa, more harm is caused. If by the Sheikh speaking, more harm is going to be caused, then it's not allowed for him to speak. Okay, if such is the case, then it is imperative to withhold from issuing a ruling as to avoid the greater harm of the two evils. That's a general principle. If you have two harms, you take the less harm. So if by him not speaking, there might be some harm, but by him speaking, it's going to cause even more fitna and even more harm. And then the mufti stays quiet, because now he's taking the lesser of the two evils. Now we talked about some of the things regarding the mufti and when it's permissible, when it's obligatory for him to speak. Now we are talking about some of the things which are the questioner, the mustafti. Okay, and this is us, right? When we're asking our teachers, our mashayikh questions and so on, or fatwa, then what are the things we should keep in consideration? Okay, and the Sheikh mentions a few things. Right, he's only got 2 things here. Okay, in the Arabic, I've got 4. Now, so I'll mention these 2 and I'll mention the others as well. The first is that he seeks from his questioning the truth and to act upon it, not seeking fatwa of what he wants, or leaving the mufti unable to answer, and such other improper intent, like we mentioned previously. So when you ask, you should be sincere in asking and only want the truth. The second, that he only asks those who he knows or his family holds to be from the people capable of giving fatwa. He should choose the mufti that has the most knowledge and piety. It is said that this is obligatory. So the second point is that he should ask those people who are ahlun lil fatwa, those people who are qualified and able to give fatwa. And subhanAllah, what happens, and this happened to me many times when I was in Medina or when I go for Umrah and so on, random people come up to me, Sheikh, I got this issue. I'm random, but they don't know who I am. And they see the beard, they see a shiva, Sheikh, I got a question. And in that scenario, if I know, I tell them, and if I don't, then I tell them, ask a mufti. But the point being is that why are they going to any random person? They should go to the ulama, go to Mashallah, there's so many. So you should go to people who are qualified, not any random person with a beard, and that's it. Okay. And who you should go to, your teacher or the mufti, there should be some qualities that they have. One of them is that they should be knowledgeable. The second is that they should be trustworthy. They should be trustworthy. So you trust that they, with the knowledge that they are giving, they're going to give what they think to be the truth. They are not going to be lenient or lazy when it comes to looking at the proofs, or when it comes to giving an easy answer or something that would benefit them. No, they are trustworthy and they want to follow the truth. And these are two things that I believe Shaykh Al-Uthaymeen also mentions in Ta'zim al-Ilm. And in the last sentence, the Shaykh kind of indicates to an issue is that, is it obligatory upon the person to ask the most knowledgeable, or can he ask anyone who he thinks is qualified? Okay, this is an issue. Is it obligatory upon a person to ask the most knowledgeable? And the stronger opinion is that it's not obligatory. As long as the person is qualified and you can ask them, and they will give him the answer, it's permissible. And the Shaykh at the end, he said, some have said it's obligatory, but what seems to be more correct is that it's not obligatory. And that is the opinion of the majority of the Usuli on that. It's not obligatory, but it's better to. And what seems to be the proof for this is firstly what proof is the ijma' of the Sahaba. The Sahaba would ask other Sahaba, even though there might be somebody who is more respectable or knowledgeable than them. So they might have asked, if Abu Bakr was alive, they might not have always gone to him. They might have gone to somebody else, younger. There might be many reasons for that. Abu Bakr might be busy with something else, or just they don't want to. But you could see from the action of Sahaba, they didn't always go to the most knowledgeable. So that shows that it is not obligatory. Some other things which I mentioned here as well is that in the Arabic I've got is number 3 is to explain your situation precisely. Explain your situation precisely. And that links with what you mentioned previously. Number 4 is that when the answer is being given, pay attention properly so you understand, so that you fully understand the answer. Pay attention fully so that you fully understand the answer. So, that sometimes the Mufti says something and people go around saying that, oh, the Mufti said this, but he might not have said that. It's you've misunderstood, you weren't paying attention, or you weren't listening with an open mind, you were listening with you wanted a certain type of answer, and that's all you understood. So the 4th is that you listen carefully, properly, so that you can understand the answer properly also. And I would add, some more as well, is that you should also ask with the etiquettes of seeking knowledge, the etiquettes of questioning, with the etiquettes of questioning. So, and these are mentioned generally in the books of seeking knowledge and so on. Some mention that when you ask a question, make dua, Shaykh Jazakallah khairan, or Ahsan Allah ilayk, or whatever the case may be. Okay, you should make a dua for them. Choose the right time to ask them as well. Don't bombard them with too many questions at once. That can be too much, and so on. So anything else which comes under etiquettes, which some are mentioned in the books, and some are just known to the people. So you don't call the Shaykh, like in England, sometimes we do have people coming up to sing, yo, yeah, I don't know if you, because that's how the youngsters speak. So they say, yo, bro, how are you? That's how just the slang that we speak over here. But some people they ask the Sheikhs that question because they don't know. Okay, so we don't really say anything to re-answer the question and so on. But generally, that's not from respect to speak to a teacher or to a Sheikh or someone like that. So all of the etiquette should be upheld also. Now we move on to the next chapter, which is similar, which is regarding ijtihad, and then we talk about taqleed at the end. And inshallah, I want to try to finish. If you can finish in 20 minutes, that's very good. Inshallah. Ijtihad linguistically means exerting full effort in trying to understand a difficult issue, and technically to make an effort to understand a legal ruling, Islamic ruling. Remember, legal, he means Islamic ruling. And the mujtahid is the one who exerts his utmost to do so. So ijtihad is the action, and mujtahid is the one doing the action. Okay, so a person who works hard by looking at the texts and the proofs so that he can come to a conclusion of a Islamic ruling. Now, what are the conditions of ijtihad? Because mujtahid is not like a normal sheikh or something, like it's the highest caliber. So there have to be a number of there has to be a number of conditions. But before that, I do want to mention a number of things before we read the conditions. Firstly, what are some of the objectives of ijtihad? Why do we have ijtihad? Why do we have mujtahids? The first is to preserve the religion. First is to preserve the religion, because if a mujtahidun were not there, then the lay people won't be able to, they'll be interpreting the religion according to what they think. The second is also to test the mujtahidun themselves, and also for their ranks to be raised. So benefit for them, mujtahidun, to test them, are they sincere, will they work hard, and so on. And if they do so, then their ranks will be raised and they will gain a lot of reward for that. And the third is that because every time and place, scenarios and rulings differ. And who is the one that's going to give the correct ruling, an appropriate ruling, a suitable ruling for that time and place? It's going to be the mujtahid. It's going to be the mujtahid. So the conditions of ijtihad has conditions including the following. Number one, that the mujtahid knows the legal evidences he needs in his effort to make ijtihad, such as the virtues of pertaining to rulings and their corresponding narrations. So the first condition that they mention is that mujtahid has to know those ayat and hadith pertaining to ahkam, rulings. Okay, so notice they don't say he has to be a hafiz of the Quran. It's not necessary to be a hafiz, but he has to at least know the rulings, or those ayat pertaining to rulings, and those ahadith pertaining to rulings also. Those ahadith sometimes regarding virtues or stories and so on, if he doesn't know that, that's fine, because the ruling is not really based on that. So at least, as long as he knows those ayat and ahadith regarding rulings, then he's good to go. The second is to know the authenticity of the hadith and the weakness, such as knowing the chains and narrations and its narrators. He should know what's authentic and what's not. If he doesn't, then he's going to be using a weak hadith, thinking it's sahih, and likewise, and that's going to cause a lot of issues as well. The third is to know abrogating and abrogated and the instances of consensus, ijma', to avoid ruling with something abrogated or oppose a consensus. He should know nasikh and mansukh, where ijma' has taken place. Otherwise, he'll be given a ruling, but find out later it's mansukh if he doesn't. Or he'll give a ruling and he's gone against ijma'. Number 4, to know from the evidences what differs with a ruling from takhsis, taqeed, takhsis khas, yani, taqeed, muqayyad, and so on, as to avoid ruling something that opposes it. A lot, basically usool al-fiqh. To know the language and the principles of fiqh. Again, the Shaykh is principles of fiqh, and he's going to mention which is connected to the words such as am, khas, mutlaq, muqayyad, mujmal, mubayyan, etc., so that he can rule according to what those terms necessitate. Similar to the fourth point, but this is more to do with the wording, more to do with the wordings themselves. So again, bit through usool al-fiqh, both are similar to usool al-fiqh, but number 5 is a bit more specific to the wordings, and also knowing the Arabic language generally as well, not just in usool al-fiqh, but also the meaning of the words. Okay, so when he says Arabic, the actual Arabic here, I've got an ya'rif min lughat al-Arab, that you should know the language of the Arabs, i.e. the Arabic language. You should know the meaning of the words and so on. Otherwise, as you can tell, translating into English, it doesn't give the full meaning, as you can see. And sometimes Arabic letters have, even letter like ma, the poet, he says, mahamidu ma ashrun idha rumta addaha fahafiz ala bayti slim min sha'ri, till the end. He says that the word ma has more than 10 meanings. The word ma has more than 10 meanings, subhanAllah. So, now it's very important to know the Arabic language. For those that do know Arabic, I'll give you a very simple example of ma. It can mean a question, masmuk, or ma ismuk, what is your name? It can mean negating, ma dhahabtu, I have not gone. Right, just you can see the difference. It can use as something masdariya, sa'usalli ma dumtu hayya, for example. So just that ma can have so many different meanings. Anyways, number 6, to have the ability to be able to derive rulings from the evidences, to have the ability to do so. So this is different. So just because a person knows the things doesn't mean he's able to he's able to, he knows, you know, because he knows the rulings, he knows the ayat, he knows the ahadith, doesn't mean he's able to derive the rulings and get to an evidence, get to a ruling, and he'd be able to apply that ruling in that scenario and so on. So that's why, you know, a student should, you know, a lot of ulama advise that he should do mumarasa with a teacher, that when he gets asked questions, come to a conclusion, but get a double check with the teacher to make sure has he done it correctly or not, and that will do in practice to do this as well. We can add a seventh one as well, which is to know the objectives of the Sharia. Number 7 is to know the objectives of the Sharia. And what this is more to do with applying the ruling. So for example, the Sharia has come to preserve a person's religion, and also to preserve a person's lineage and family, and also a person's wealth as well. It's not come to take people's money away from them. So you need to, you know, this is a separate science, it's called maqasid al-Sharia. If a person doesn't know, he might come to a ruling, but a ruling that he's come to after all of that hard work actually goes against what the Sharia is trying to do. So he's come to a ruling and he's like, hang on a minute, this is causing people just to lose money. The Sharia doesn't want people to lose money. He wants them to keep their money and not be wasted. So if he knows the maqasid al-Sharia, then, and he knows what the objectives of the Sharia are, then that allows him to apply the rulings better. And then the Sheikh finishes off with an issue. He says, an ijtihad can be categorized, so it can be in a particular chapter from the chapters of knowledge or a certain problem. This is an issue. Can you split ijtihad? Meaning, can you say, instead of saying that a person is mujtahid in every single science, in every single field, can you see that this person is a mujtahid in a certain field? Okay, in fiqh he's a mujtahid, or even within fiqh, in inheritance he is, or in tahara, or in transactions he's a mujtahid, but in the other sciences or other chapters he is not. Now some have said no, okay, and some have said no except for inheritance, because inheritance is like a separate thing by itself. Those that have studied know. However, the Sheikh said no, the correct opinion is that it can be. So it can be that a person specializes in mujtahid in transactions, but he now might not be as knowledgeable in criminal law, for example. So the Sheikh says that can take place. What is necessary for a mujtahid? What is necessarily incumbent on a mujtahid is that he exerts his efforts in trying to find the truth, then he rules with that which is clear to him. And if he gets it right, then he has 2 rewards: a reward for his effort and a reward for him getting it right, because reaching the truth is a manifestation of it and acting according to it. If he errs, then he has just 1 reward, and a mistake is forgiven according to the hadith for Rasulullah. When a judge gives a ruling, then he tries his best to find the truth, and if he gets it right, then he has 2 rewards, and if he judges and gets it wrong, then he only has 1 reward. If a rule, this is the famous hadith that if a mujtahid, sincere and is qualified, he works hard. If he gets it correct, 2 rewards: 1 for the hard work and the second for getting it correct. If he gets it wrong, 1 reward for the hard work. As for getting it wrong, it's forgiven. But from this, subhanAllah, there's another issue that you can benefit, which is that the truth is only one. Al-haqqu wahid, or al-musiba wahid. The one who's actually got the correct answer is only one. The truth is only one. Notice you get 2 rewards: 1 for trying and 1 for the truth. So it's not, just because there's 2 opinions doesn't mean both are, meaning that both, if there's khilaf and it's an actual khilaf which is based upon adillah and qualified people and so on, then yes, if one takes another opinion, he's fine, there's no sin or anything upon him. But in terms of it being the truth is only one. The truth is only one. In that scenario, he follows what he sees to be stronger. But in reality, what is the actual truth? Then the truth is only one, and that's taken from this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So the truth can't be more than one. Not every single person is right. Okay, the truth is only one, and there's many proofs for that. But from them, and one of the strongest of them is this hadith. The Prophet ﷺ saying that he get 2 rewards: 1 for working out and 1 for the truth. Now the other person, he got rewarded. There's no sin upon him, but he didn't get the truth. And then the Shaykh finished off by saying, if a ruling does not appear upon him, then he must hold back, and then it is permissible for him to blindfold, let's say taqleed, because of the necessity. In that case, if he doesn't know, then he asks another alim and he follows another alim, and that leads us on to the final chapter, which is regarding at-taqleed. Now, it's nearly Maghrib time for me as well, so I need to be a bit quick with this as well, inshallah. The definition, taqleed, linguistically means to put something around the neck, encompassing It's like a qalala rope around the neck. And technically, it means to follow the sayings of someone's statement who are not in evidence. Taqleed means to follow somebody whose statement is not in evidence. Meaning, a mujtahid, whose statements are not in evidence. Whose statements are evidence? The Prophet ﷺ, people of ijma', if they all get together, and the saying of a sahabi. Other than that, if you follow Imam Malik, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Shafi'i, their statements themselves are not evidences. So following them is taqleed. What is excluded? So now the Shaykh explains that. Situations of taqleed. Now the Shaykh is going to talk about, when can you do taqleed, when can you not, and what about following a madhab? Okay, the Shaykh will talk about that, so please be patient with that, inshallah. The Shaykh, situation of taqleed. Taqleed can occur in two situations. That the blind follower, I don't really like the transition of blind follower, because taqleed doesn't always mean blind following whatsoever, meaning you don't follow the Prophet ﷺ. It can have a correct meaning also, if used correctly and if you mean a certain meaning by it. But let's just carry on, inshallah. And the Sheikh's going to talk about that later. But is that the blind follower be a common person who is not able to know the ruling for himself? So it is compulsory upon him to follow due to the statement, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. And that's the people of reminder, i.e. the ulama, if you do not know. So he follows the best one he can find in terms of knowledge and piety, and if they are similar, then he can simply choose. And I think that's quite straightforward. If a person doesn't know anything, what does he do? He can't get to a ruling himself, so he asks a scholar. He asks a scholar, and the scholar says the answer is this because of this ayah. Okay, so that is a form of taqleed in the general sense, which is correct. Now, I know some will say that's not called taqleed, that's called ittiba' and so on, but that's why the Shaykh will talk about the different meanings of taqleed shortly. Number two, the mujtahid is confronted with an incident that requires immediate response. Okay, this point is that the mujtahid himself, an issue has come to him and he needs an answer right away. But he doesn't have, sometimes the mujtahid, sometimes it's not a condition that he has to know the answer 100% on the spot. Okay, he's allowed to go back to his books, double check or something, but he doesn't have time for that. In that scenario, and he needs the answer right now, he can't delay. In that scenario, it's permissible for him to also maybe ask somebody else, another scholar, or follow the fatwa of another scholar. The Sheikh, he says, some have laid down a condition for the permissibility of blind following that it should not be done in the principles of religion, which are to be believed in, but in beliefs which we must have resolved, and blind following does not give that certainty, only conjecture. The most correct opinion, however, is that this is not a condition due to the saying of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. The verse is in the context of affirming the message. Okay. This issue is that, what about in Aqidah? Can you blind follow in Aqidah? Because Aqidah is your beliefs need certainty. The Shaykh said the correct opinion is that it is permissible to do taqleed in Aqidah also, meaning you ask a scholar and he gives you the answer. Because Allah says, ask the people of knowledge if you do not know. And if you look at the context is talking about the messengers and establishing messengership of the Prophet ﷺ. So that's when Allah actually said it. So that shows that it's permissible. And on the other side, how is the mujtahid going? How is the normal person who doesn't know anything? How is he going to come to a conclusion what to believe in? If he had to look into the ayat and the adillah himself, and he would make a mistake, he would, okay, this ayah says this, also this means this. He'll come to his own conclusions. Rather, you go to a scholar, you ask them, and he gives you an answer with the Quran and Sunnah also. Okay, now types of taqleed. The types of taqleed. Now, the blind following is of two types, general and specific. To commit to a certain, the first one is general, to commit to a certain school of thought, taking the allowances and decisions in all matters of this religion. The scholars have differed in this regard. Some have said he must do so due to his inability of ijtihad. Some of them have said that it is obligatory for him due to the lack of ijtihad amongst the later generations. And some of the scholars said that it is forbidden because it is following someone other than the Prophet without any restrictions. Shaykh Usool said the statement that it is obligatory to obey someone other than the Prophet in all commands and prohibitions is against the consensus, and its permissibility is what it is. وخلاف الإجماع وجوازه في okay. And he said whoever adheres, and he mentions a few of the statements of Shaykh al-Islam. This issue here, this is the issue of following a madhab. This is the issue of following a madhab. So what we talked about before was asking a scholar and he gives you an answer with the Quran and Sunnah, it's fine. But what of following a madhab? Now he does mention that there are different opinions. Some have said that it's wajib, okay? And many ulama have also said that it is muharram. And that seems to be stronger in the general sense. And this is the opinion of Imam al-Nawawi and Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Qayyim, Shaykh Muhammad al-Amin Shaqiqi, and the author rahimahullah. Because to blind follow totally anyone other than the Prophet ﷺ is not permissible. And the Shaykh now mentions some statements of Shaykh al-Islam which you can read later. But even the Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah, he was asked himself, is it obligatory to do taqleed of any single person? He said yes, it is obligatory, a full complete obligation to follow a madhab, for that is the madhab of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because it is obligatory to follow to ittiba' of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and by following the Prophet sallam, you will be happy in both abodes. Okay, now this is in regards to total blind following, meaning this Imam said this, that's it, I'm not accepting anything else. But when we talk about at-tamadhhub, which is not blind following fully a madhhab, that's why I didn't like that translation, because not every time with taqleed, any time you talk about taqleed generally means this. But another word that is used which might be better is at-tamadhhub. At-tamadhhub means that you adopt a school of thought, and that you follow its principles, but anytime it goes against the Quran or Hadith, then you follow that. That is permissible. And you'll find the majority of the ulama in the past, that's what they did. And you'll find Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah originally Hanbali, Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, Imam al-Nawawi al-Shafi'i. That's why you find when he explained fiqh books, they were Shafi'i fiqh books, because they are following their usool. But when it came to something going against the Hadith or Quran or Sunnah or whatever the case may be, then they would do that. And obviously they reached the level of ijtihad, so they were able to do that. But so for a person to just learn, okay, learn usul al-fiqh, learn fiqh, and so on, then there's no harm in that person learning a madhab. And to be honest, that's what majority of the ulama, if you look at the history, majority of the ulama, that's what they have done. That's what they have done. Now I do know, and I mention this because I do know many people who are attending the Ahl al-Hadith in Pakistan, they're totally against it. But generally, if you look at the ulama in Saudi and so on, they lean more towards what I have just said. But both of them agree that to blind follow totally 100% any madhab without a dalil, without accepting anything that comes from Prophet ﷺ, totally, this Imam said this and that's it, they say that is not allowed. And that's what we mentioned, Imam Nawawi, Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Qayyim, Shaykh Muhammad al-Amin Shaqiqi, and Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah, and others, they have all said that it is haram for a person to do that. Point number 2 is point number 2 specific, to take the words given in a particular case. It is permissible if he was unable to find out the truth through making his own ijtihad, whether that is a real inability or he had the ability but it will involve great hardship. This is, basically an issue here and there. Are you allowed to follow another madhab? If you see that to be the truth, then it is permissible, as the Shaykh has mentioned. Okay, blind following of fatwas. See, this is the incorrect translation. It's fatwa al-muqallid. Following the fatwa of a blind follower. That's a bad translation. Fatwa al-muqallid. Following the fatwa of a muqallid. Okay, somebody who's not mujtahid, basically. Now, I'm just going to summarize what's said here just for time, which is that if a person who's not mujtahid gives a fatwa, it's not permissible to follow him. It's not permissible to follow him. And I think that's quite straightforward and understood. However, then here now the Shaykh talks about another issue, which is that jawaz al-fatwa bit-taqlid. Let's say you have an issue, now you come to your friend, whoever may be, who's a muqallid, and he had a similar issue, and he went to a mufti and he got a fatwa. Let's say Your friend went to Sheikh Fawzan and got a fatwa from him. You're in a similar situation, so he says to you, yes, for this situation, the answer is this, the fatwa is this. And you can mention it because Sheikh Fawzan said this. Is that permissible? So you have taken your fatwa from this muqallid, but he's only transmitting another fatwa to you. Is that permissible? Hopefully that makes sense. So you've not gone directly to an alim, you've gone to somebody else who's a muqallid, but he is just transmitting a fatwa from a mufti. Is that permissible? Now, Sheikh mentions 3 opinions, not allowed, but then the third opinion seems to be the best, which is that is only allowed if there's a need. You can't find a mujtahid, or you don't have time, or if there's a need, then it's allowed. Otherwise, no. Why? Because the muqallid doesn't know all of these rulings, usul al-fiqh, and the objectives of Sharia and so on. Maybe your situation is slightly different. Maybe your situation is slightly different and requires a different answer. Or maybe that fatwa is 20 years old. He's found, or even Baz said this, but it was 20 years old. It doesn't necessarily apply now. Understand? So only if there's a need, like no one else now. And with now it's difficult, especially with social, with the technology. You can easily talk to Shaykh abroad and so on. But if there's a need, then it is permissible. And with that, we have concluded the book. Alhamdulillah, finished the book. I know it was long. Usool al-fiqh is the whole chapter. Usool al-fiqh and fiqh books are generally long anyway. But alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed us to finish this. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept it from us and to make it a means of benefit. If there are any questions, I'll quickly take some, but I do need to go because it's nearly Maghrib time.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. Barakallah feek for this extensive course. Alhamdulillah, we all have benefited, and I hope that many things which are related to the fiqh principles are pretty much clear, if not 100%, but alhamdulillah, we have learned a lot. Alhamdulillah.
I've benefited the most, alhamdulillah. It's a lot of good, so alhamdulillah, I've benefited the most.
Alhamdulillah, Jazakallah khair. We, inshallah, regarding the other course, I'll discuss with you, inshallah, later on, because I think the time. If you have any question related to this topic, inshallah, we can ask.
Any other courses or exams or anything, then inshallah, you'll answer, bismillah. I think if you can, I know some people are asking if I have any other lessons which are not here but elsewhere, then inshallah I'll send you some of my details and you can send it out to the brothers and sisters that are asking as well, inshallah.
Sure, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Any questions? Okay.
Sheikh, assalamu alaikum. Sheikh, one question regarding it's on. Sheikh, in one of the cases you told it is not necessary for the mufti to give answers to a questioner when his intention is to annoy or to make a free pass for some decision or make a clash between rulings of different scholars. Sheikh, how the intention of the questioner can be understood by mufti? Maybe.
So this the mufti has to judge himself now. Correct. Intentions are only known by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Obviously, if that person does have a bad intention, the mufti, if you can tell, like you can see that this, like for example, there's a person, every lesson is always asking certain type of questions. Okay. Or that before he's asked a question, and then after that question, he went on social media to write about it. Then, like that, you can try to work it out. Obviously, if a person is coming to you and asks you, you can't always tell what's inside. But just like any other situation, you can, maybe work out from what's apparent. So if the mufti does work out that he's got, and it becomes apparent to the mufti that he's got a bad intention, then that would apply. If not, and if he does, then that's between him and Allah, and the mufti can't really find out.
Okay, Sheikh, Jazakallah khair.
Is there any mujtahid? Sheikh, my question is there any mujtahid now? Nowadays?
So sorry, this every centuries this mujtahids are coming, is that's a statement, or like?
Sorry?
The every centuries, my ummah will be guided by the mujtahid or some. It's like it's a hadith from hadith.
That's mujaddid. Wallahu alam. Every 100 years a mujaddid, a reviver.
Okay, that's different.
Yeah, We may not necessarily be a mujtahid, but reviver is when the Islam's lost. People are, lost, and he comes to them. And through him, Allah guides many people and so on. That's a mujaddid. There could be an overlap. That mujaddid could be a mujtahid, but I don't think it's a condition. Wallahu a'lam.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. Barakallah feek. Inshallah, with this we can conclude the session today. And once again, on behalf of every one of us, inshallah, all the brothers, we thank you for your time. And alhamdulillah, even after going back, alhamdulillah, you took some time out for us to complete this course, which was very beneficial for us. Inshallah, we look forward to have many more courses with you, inshallah, in future. And also we look forward to see you here in Kuwait as well, inshallah, for a long, inshallah. Barakallah feek. And wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.